What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Alchemy Podcast, the process of human transformation and fulfillment. And I'm really excited for our conversation today. I'm here with Trish Damon, who is not only an inspiration to me, but a dear friend.
Hi, Doug. Inspiration to me too, of course,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah, one thing I really admire about you, Trish, and I'm thinking a lot about you, is your ability to navigate life given horrendous, incredible, extreme trauma, grief, loss. And I don't know too many people personally who have gone through the trauma you have gone through personally. And every time I see you, you're a bright sunshine light, and I energetically feel, in a woo-woo sense, a higher vibration after leaving conversation with you. And I just admire that so much, because most people, and a lot of people who have gone through experiences, aren't that way. You're bright, you're bubbly, you're glowing, you're expressive. Every person you touch is better off because they interacted with you. And your past and your history is insane. And so I'm sure we'll dive into this, but what is, like, was that a learned trait? Is that something you picked up? Like, how did you become just this? Have you always been like this energetic, bright light?
Thank you for the accolades, first and foremost. It's a good question. I recently filmed a trauma series and the same question came up. And, why is it that some are born with such incredible resilience and others aren't? And I undoubtedly have the gift of resilience. I believe in the magic of the universe. And I think that we have choice in how we navigate. We can look at everything as a gift, or we can become a victim to what's happened to us. And I am so grateful that through the course of my life and the journey that I've been on, I look at those touch points of magic because they're always there, and I think if we can really take our life experiences and look at what it's teaching us, it can be transformational. And that's the path and the choice that I've made in this lifetime. It's not to say it's been easy. It's been a little tricky at times, but it definitely, has been worth it. And I continue to anchor in that, belief.
Yeah, I love how you said there's and I agree with this, how there's always magic happening, right? And if you can really slow down and look at it, you can see the universe, conspiring in your favor. Is that something you learned? Was that a learned behavior? Have you guys always had that there's magic here? Or is that something after kind of going through traumatic experiences and an awakening that you were then able to learn how to do?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think children of extreme abuse, which I am a child of some of the most extreme abuse, we are hypersensitive. So our sensory and feeling is just turned on more than others. And so I think from a young age, I could sense and feel things that others couldn't. And then I think, I ended up going to school here at University of Santa Monica and studying spiritual psychology. And through that course in particular, along with other, things that I've studied, it's that we can, play with the universal energy of really tapping into that. And I do believe that everything is a frequency, right? And so what we choose to associate ourselves with matters, and the people that we choose to associate ourselves with. So I'm really sensitive to that.
Yeah, and I think that's why we connect so well, right? We kind of we agree, and we kind of have these universal principles, truth, ingrained in our foundation. And we have so much in common. And different stories, but we were both sexually abused as kids. We both grew up Mormon. We both had kind of exodus as a Mormon in kind of an intense way. And we're both entrepreneurs, and we both found immense healing through the psychedelic space.
True. Yes. It's interesting because I lost my sister in 2017. And after her death, I kind of found myself in my bedroom like, hey, God, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need to find a path to healing. And it became really clear in looking for a different, I had been in therapy for years, it wasn't working. And it was through that period of time of seeking and looking for something outside the norm that I found my path to psychedelic medicines. And I believe wholeheartedly they saved my life.
Yeah. What was your relationship to quote unquote God, universe, before 2017?
I left the Mormon faith when I was 16. And I think that when I left, I really also kind of disowned God as we knew it within the faith. And, nature became my church. Being in the outdoors became my church. And I didn't really have a deep connection to that universal energy. But after doing psychedelics and kind of seeing all realms of possibility, it opened me up to a new relationship as, the divine, as I might call it.
Yeah. Explain I want to go back and touch on, your being 16 and whatnot growing on. But before that, my first psychedelic experience, it shattered my constructs of reality so deeply and completely rearranged my viewpoint on my existence. And tell us about people are always like, oh, you hear a lot for people who haven't had psychedelics, like how does it change your life? What do you mean? Like, it's hard to understand. Walk us through kind of your first experience, because I know it was intense.
So my first experience with psychedelics was with iboga, which, as you know, is one of the most powerful hallucinogens. And I think that some people dance really well with psychedelics and others do not. And for me, my brain loves psychedelics. It's like I can drop into the space really easily. And that was even from the first experience that I had. So as I said, I had studied a lot and been in a lot of traditional therapy, but I was having a lot of symptoms of abuse, but I didn't have the memories. And so my first psychedelic experience, I was coming out the birthing canal of my mom, and it was from the time I was born, reliving a life review until present day. And all of a sudden, I understood all the roles and characters in my family, the dysfunction, how we interacted with each other, the abuse that I had repressed. And that to me gave me something tangible to heal. It's like now I know what I'm working towards. And that was an absolute game changer.
Yeah. And I loved the psychedelic experience because it removes, at least for me, it removes me from my experience.
Yeah.
And
do you want to share more about your experience of?
Yeah, I think on that too, my experience, it was, I'll never forget, it was my fourth night ever doing ayahuasca. And you talk about some of these repressed memories. And I was new to the space. I had big experiences that were more kind of broader on like, what's my purpose? And it was really enlightening, and it removed a lot of my anxiety and frustration. But this fourth night specifically, I remember I was sitting with ayahuasca, and I drink the ayahuasca, and I remember laying down on the mat, kind of going through the ceremony. And I remember getting these like instant flashbacks to when I was a kid, 6 years old, at my friend's house. And we were playing in his basement. And this friend of mine was one who sexually abused me. And I remember when those memories started coming in, I remember thinking like, why am I thinking about this right now? I'm here to do ayahuasca. Like, that's a weird memory to think about. Like, I'm here for the show. And then I was like, wait, this is why you do it. And so I kind of like surrendered into it, and I continue to relive these memories of my friend taking me into the back room. And it wasn't malicious abuse. It was more of a curiosity, and he would take my clothes off and inappropriately touch me and whatnot. And I remember in the experience, I was really confused. I mean, I'm 6 years old. I don't know what's going on, but I remember it was bad. Like, I remember that, like, this isn't good. This isn't good. What's happening? And he was my best friend at the time. And so I was like curious, and I remember leaning into the medicine and being like, okay, what is this teaching me? How has this affected me? And I really zoomed out of my life. And I remember, it was crazy, was when I was 16, or when he was 16 and I was 14, he got into a car accident and died. And I remember when I heard the news, the first emotion that I felt was a massive sense of relief.
Oh, wow.
Because like, wow, no one will ever know. Like, no one's going to know. This is to the grave. We're going to lock this memory up. We're going to put it away. Now no one will ever touch it. No one will ever know that this happened. And I remember feeling relieved. And then I remember asking the medicine, because, you know, you talk about dancing with it. You can interact with it. And I remember asking, like, well, how has this affected me? And it showed me throughout my whole life, junior high, high school, college, that I had a little bit more difficult time making friends with men, guy friends. And I had a massive wall up. And I remember, and I had like really weird memories popping in of like meeting a new guy, and I would make a comment in some capacity of, oh, this girl's so pretty, or this is the girl I'm dating. And what I was doing subconsciously was telling him like, hey, don't come on to me.
Wow.
Because I'm straight. Like, so don't try and come on to me. And it was because of that pattern I learned that, hey, my best friend, my first true best friend I had, abused me and took advantage of me. And then there was a story that men aren't safe.
That's big. May I ask you some questions about it?
Yeah, please.
I'm curious, was your friend also Mormon?
He grew up Mormon.
And so what part of the religion played a role in concealing the abuse or not really looking at it, if at all?
Well, I never brought it up. I never told anyone about it. So I hid it away. But it's interesting on the Mormon piece is I remember when I was 8 and I got baptized. And I remember thinking, whew, sins are washed away. So I'm good. I'm clear of that.
Wow.
Like I remember leading up to that, like I can't wait till I'm 8 and my sins get washed away. And then that whole experience that happened, like I'll be free of that.
Right.
Right. And so also I know I never brought it up. It was never talked about. I was never asked about it because no one ever knew it happened.
Right.
And so, you know, in the religion too, it's a really tricky space. And what's crazy is I came out and talked about it, you know, in 2017, 2018 for the first time. And the amount of people who reached out and said, hey, something similar happened to me. And I reported it to a bishop or someone in the church and nothing happened.
Right. And that's kind of the initiative that I'm working on right now is there is such extreme concealed abuse within the Mormon faith. And of course it bleeds beyond Mormonism.
Right.
But specifically, I think we haven't really talked about it yet. And I think that, you know, bishops are in a role of authority, and yet they aren't really trained in these types of incidences. And so I know specifically within my family, there was a lot of sexual abuse, and my mom would go to the bishop and the bishop would kind of dismiss it. And I think that it's something that, you know, when I started going through my psychedelic journey, I hadn't looked at it at all. However, I kept finding myself in relationships with sex addicts and narcissists. And it's like, okay, where am I attracting this? Where is this coming from? And once I was really able to look at my own abuse, then I could really start to do the deep dive in healing it.
Yeah. And when did your abuse start?
It started when I was pretty young, you know, 2-3 years old.
Yeah. And how did that all unfold?
You know, you'll have to read my memoir if you really want to know the details about it.
We'll go to the details. And the memoir comes out when?
The memoir will be coming out next year, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Really excited about that because it is my passion and my mission to shed light on this and to also, you know, not that sexual abuse, we want to normalize that, but talking about it and finding avenues for help. And I think, you know, one of the hard parts about it is a lot of our abuse is happening within our families and we don't want to talk about it or expose it. And yet, you know, I think it's important that we do, and to dispel not only the shame, you know, for ourselves, but those who are also involved, and be able to create a different dialogue around sexual abuse within families.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's a really complex topic.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of moving pieces into it. And if you're open, I would love, I mean, if you're willing to share your experience of being 16 and what that was like.
Yeah. So when I was 16, I became pregnant by a boy in school, in my high school. And instantly, I mean, I was Mormon. I'm the baby of 9 kids. You know, I have committed the absolute sin by having premarital sex, and now I'm pregnant.
And not only were you Mormon, you were like active, you were doing the things, you were sports, you were...
Yeah, I was a violinist, pianist, tennis, in the marching band, color guard, all the things. And so, I mean, for me, not only did I have a bright future, but I also had a very religious family within the church. And so I had told one girlfriend that I was pregnant and that I was going to go have an abortion. I mean, one, I wanted to hide it as quickly as possible from my family. And two, there was just no way that I could have a child.
What was your initial reaction when you found out?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think your initial reaction is shock. And then I think it hits you. Well, it hit me within the faith of what I had done, by way of sinning. And then I think you're absolutely paralyzed. I mean, being 16 and pregnant is a big deal. It's a big deal to become pregnant as a young,
Anytime.
married mother,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Let alone being underage. And so my girlfriend had called my parents and told them I was pregnant. And my parents took me to the bishop's house. And he essentially just said, look, there's a place where we take girls like you. And they shipped me out. At the time, my parents were living in Northern California. And they shipped me off to an all-girls school in Provo. And so here I am, 16 with other wayward girls that were also pregnant, going to school. And I begged and pleaded with my parents to come back home to give birth to my son. And, you're terrified to go through this alone. And so finally they acquiesce. And I came home and ended up giving birth to a baby boy. And I was so small at the time. I had really challenging complications and they had to rush me into emergency surgery afterwards. And when I came out, there was this family holding my child that my parents had called to adopt my son.
And you didn't know about this?
And I didn't know about it. And, and it's kind of standard protocol within the church. Like if you get pregnant, I've now come to find out that there have been thousands of women that have been through a similar situation in the church. It's like, let's sweep it under the rug. Let's get on with our lives and, move on. And so I kind of go into hysterics of, there's no way I'm going to let them take my child.
So you're literally in the hospital.
In the
thinking,
hospital.
This is my son.
Yeah.
And it's ripped away.
Yeah. Ripped away. So, luckily there was a nurse there who had enough wherewithal to take my child and put him back in my arms and escort this couple out. And she kind of sat me down and said, is this what you want to do? And it's like, no, it's not what I want to do. This isn't, my choice at all. And she said, well, you're legally emancipated. So if you have a child in the state of California under the age of 18, then you become an adult, right? And so my choice was to keep my son. And I ended up doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
how long? Yeah, how long did you get to keep him for?
And so then I had him.
So, ushers the family out. You're like, no, this is my baby. Mm-hmm. You're not taking my baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So family's out.
Family's out. I end up having to stay in the hospital for a little bit to recover from surgery and the complications that I had, and then I finally moved home with my parents and started going to school, going to college at the time. And then when my son was about 9 months old, the bishop of the church called me and he said, I've had a vision from God. And God has come through and told me that this child is not meant to be with you. Wow. And so at that time, my son was then given to my sister who could not have children.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where do you think that insight came from? Do you think someone was in his ear?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that my parents definitely didn't want to carry the weight of having to raise not only me, but now a baby. I think that they were looking for the best solution in their eyes of how do we reconcile this? This daughter can't have children. This daughter's too young, in their opinion, to raise her child. How do we kind of reconcile this? And, I later confronted my mom about it and I just said, what was behind your decision making? And she's like, well, we just didn't want that shame upon our family.
Wow.
And so, I will say I have now taken my 80-year-old mother to the jungle to do ayahuasca. So a lot of healing has happened
Yeah.
between us. But I think at the time, there, it's part of, in my experience, the culture within the church.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because they give your son to your sister. And were you able to be a part of his upbringing from a distance?
I was. So I then became the aunt,
Yeah.
right? Which was a unique role to play. And there was a lot of, it was interesting because my mom kind of always had this saying of, aren't we so blessed, and kind of like the
Sure.
religious
Sure.
culture.
Yeah.
I mean, did you have that
Mormon
growing
voice.
up?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Mormon voice. And so, it was, I kind of drank that Kool-Aid of, oh yeah, this is the best thing that could have happened. When really, let's like rewind this even more though and talk about, women's autonomy and the right to choose for their bodies. And, I wish that my family would have talked about how you got pregnant, birds and the bees.
Sure.
But in the Mormon faith, those weren't conversations that they were having.
Right.
It was really taboo. And so I think had I even understood that, I probably wouldn't have ended up where I was.
Yeah. And was there like a yearning to have your son back with you as you're kind of watching him grow up from afar?
That's, no one has ever asked me that question. And, one of my biggest challenges that I continue to try to heal from is disassociation. And, when you come from extreme abuse, one of the maladapted coping strategies is to numb or leave your body. And I am an expert at it. It's something that has taken me a lot of work to become embodied. And so I think at the time, the pain of what had happened was so severe that longing for him in the way that I think you're asking was so painful that I had to create a veneer just to protect from the pain of that. Now, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about him from the day he was born. How can one not? But that longing in those years when he was with my sister, I think I almost had to, pull away from that to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. What does the disassociation look like for you in that time?
Ooh, that's good. Well, I think that I have always found solace within. I can go and spend hours inside myself. Like, I love
Same.
being alone with
Same.
myself.
I love
it's
it.
so good.
Yeah.
Where my partner now is just like, where are you? I'm like, oh, I'm having the time of my life.
Yeah.
Right
I'm good.
inside my little happy place. But I think in my 20s, it was, sex, drugs, and, alcohol and distracting and numbing. And, I think that was something that really, anything to not feel the depth and breadth of that pain.
Yeah.
And I think it took me, I didn't do my first psychedelic dose of Iboga until I was in my late 30s. So I really spent my 20s and 30s avoiding feeling what I'd been through.
Yeah. And then eventually at 18, there's a kind of a reconnection. What was that like?
Whew. When he came back to live with me, I believe that the universe can create a confluence of events that kind of cracks us open neurologically. For some, it could be death of a loved one, divorce, a myriad of traumatic events, right? And for me, it was the day that my son came back to be with me, and it cracked open a well of repressed memories that I had not dealt with. And it...
Was it planned? Was it like in conversations, or was it like one day, bags on the front porch, I'm here?
Yeah, it was kind of one day, bags on the front porch, and I'm here. And I think what I didn't expect, and something that has been my greatest challenge, is when he was sitting with me, and I don't think I've ever talked about this even publicly, when he was sitting with me, I wanted so desperately to share with him, I love you so much. I've waited for this moment my whole life, and just to hold him so close. And I realized the pain of losing him was so great that I couldn't even allow myself to be that intimate with him. And I realized too a pattern in my own life of choosing partners that couldn't intimately connect with me because I couldn't intimately connect with myself. And that's been probably my greatest healing over the last, 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, really done a lot of work. And so he's with you, he's 18, right? How long was that for? What was that experience like? What healing was involved with that? And you mentioned it cracked you open.
It did crack me open. So, unfortunately for him, I don't think it was the experience he was looking for. I really cracked open such a well of repressed childhood trauma that my ability to fully be present with him. And I was kind of like, God, I've waited for this moment for 18 years. And now you're going to crack open all of this other like trauma and I'm not going to be able to be present with him. And, and I also believe in the divine timing of the universe. And I had to go through, the dark night of the soul, whatever you want to call it, my, cracking open. And, for him, it was really traumatic for him to be with me and me not be able to fully show up. And so he was with me only a few months and then chose to leave.
Yeah, it seems like he was kind of sent in to blow it all up.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned, I want to make note of this too, because I remember it was an insightful moment for me when I was going through my spiritual awakening. And you talk about dark night of the soul. And I remember when I first started, I'm like, oh, that sounds intense. And then you go through it and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like that is the worst. So for anyone who's listening, who's not familiar with the dark night of the soul, can you put more information on that?
Well, I think, maybe you can share yours as well. I think it's that, for me, it was that moment that buckled me to my knees where I had to be in such full surrender because trying to control anything in your life was absolutely impossible as you're being absolutely torn open to the magnificence of who you are. But before going through that, you have to be completely broken down.
Yeah. And, you said that so beautifully. And in my experience, I love how you use the word surrender, where the dark night of the soul will break you so far to where you don't have another option other than to surrender.
Right.
And the end result of it is learning to build a beautiful relationship and trust with creation, the creator, God, the universe. And it will force you on your knees and put you in such a difficult place. My dark night of the soul was, dealing with the grief of my dad passing, at the same time leaving Mormonism, at the same time the girl who I thought the love of my life I was going to marry breaks up with me, while also being in $300,000 worth of debt and being unfulfilled in a job and feeling I have no life purpose and no direction, right? All in, within 60 days.
That was good. That was like good. Magical from the universe. You're welcome.
It's like, here, we're going to punish you. We're going to break you so far where you have no other choice but to learn to trust and surrender. And so we go through these massive experiences. While you're in it, it's torture.
Yeah.
Like it's pure hell. It was the first time in my life where I had suicide ideology.
Yeah.
Right. It's like this, it sounds nice, like that could be a sense of relief for me. And, but looking back at it, once you get through it, you're like, wow, I'm so grateful for that experience.
Yeah. I want to touch on that because I too had suicidal ideology when I went through it. I wanted nothing more than to die. I was in such emotional pain. And in 2017, I lost a sister to a fentanyl overdose. And this last October, I lost a sister to suicide. And I've had to sit with both of their deaths with such reflection and humility of I was there in those moments where I felt like I couldn't go on. And now to come out the other side, it's just such a tragic loss. And I think it's something that's so important that we do highlight, that we can go on and that there is a way out and to continue. One of the things that I often say is, You do not get to get away with not doing the work. You have to do the work to heal. And some don't, often I have people say, well, what does that mean? So, I mean, I would ask you, what does it mean to you for you to have done the work to get to where you are today?
Yeah, the work is, it's difficult. And, to your point, you can run from it, but you can't hide.
Yeah.
Right. Because we have these patterns, these unhealthy patterns that disrupt our whole lives. And to me, the work is dealing with, I say, the thing we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Right. There's that thing that happened that we don't talk about that was incredibly traumatic or intense, or grief, loss, despair. Part of the human experience is every single person, you're going to deal with immense amounts of heartbreak, death, grief, loss, sadness, despair. Right. It's part of the experience. And, people have had horrible things done to them.
Yeah.
And not dealing with it will create massive disruption in your life, period, right? It's the patterns you learn. And so doing the work is looking at areas of your life that are not abundant, that are not beautiful, that are not expansive, that are not growth oriented, that are causing you pain, and actually figuring out the root cause of it. Like, where did this actually come from? And, another thing we have in common that we love is Hoffman process.
Yes.
Right. I love, this is the biggest endorsement for Hoffman process ever. To me, I think outside of plant medicine work, it is the most profound, beneficial, interactive experience you can have, I think.
1,000%.
And it's not woo, it's not weird, it's not cultish, it's not salesy. It's just pure, your life, you're not happy in your life.
Yeah.
This is why.
Yep.
And let's deal with it.
Well, and I think Hoffman is the perfect compilation and orchestra of the hybrid modalities that can help you heal.
Very well said.
Meditation, traditional therapy, visualizations, all these are somatic processing.
Lots of somatics.
And so it's one of those that they cherry pick the best of the best. And I think that I've come to really, 2 years ago, I took 8 of my family members to the jungle to do ayahuasca. And it was such a profound experience, but I also realized that the medicine path isn't for everyone.
Yes.
And, I often really sit in reflection about my choice to invite them, and of course we all have free will. They made the choice themselves. But I also realized I had years of therapy and tools in the toolkit. And I think, just circling back to Hoffman, I think everyone should have to go through Hoffman.
Yeah.
I think it should just be, life 101, because it gives you the tools and how to navigate life.
Yeah. HoffmanInstitute.org for those listening.
Yeah.
Couldn't recommend enough. For me, my breakthrough at Hoffman, and I want to touch on the psychedelics isn't for everyone, because I totally agree with you on that. My breakthrough on Hoffman, and I never would have put this together. So I went, a dear friend of mine, Bea Voce, she went and she called me right after. She goes, Doug, if you've trusted me on anything in your life, it's this. Sign up, go as soon as you can. And I went in and was blown away. And I went in because I was dealing with issues in romantic relationships and couldn't figure out why I couldn't hold a relationship. And, I pieced it together. As we're kids, we want one thing, and that's love and praise and approval and validation from mom and dad. Right? That's just a core need, in your adolescence. And I grew up, and my dad was my football coach. And it's interesting, I don't have a conscious memory of my dad telling me that he loved me in those words. I felt he definitely loved me. I felt it. He showered me in it. Like, he just didn't use the word "I love you," right? He did it in other ways.
Yeah.
And he definitely loved me, and I felt his love for sure. And as a football coach, the way you get praise and approval from your coach is by performance.
Yeah.
Great job, bud. I have so many memories of good job, bud. I'm so proud of you. Good job, bud. Proud of you, bud. Nice job, bud.
Yeah.
Great play. Nice job. Great game. Right? And that's how I got validation.
Sure.
And so I learned that pattern as a kid, that if I perform and do a good job, I get love. And so I was realizing in my romantic relationships that I was trying to perform for my partner.
Wow.
And so I have to have a #1 best-selling book, and I have to have $1 million in the bank, and I have to have a top podcast, and I have to be successful entrepreneur before I'm even worthy of love. Like, I'm not worthy of love until I perform. And so I would sabotage my relationships by not feeling worthy of love, first off, because I haven't done anything yet. So I would sabotage. And that insight completely changed the trajectory of my whole life.
Wow.
And, you go into these, and that's one pattern, right? And at Hoffman, you walk away with 50, right?
But look at the adverse of that is, look, you've accomplished all those things as well. So it's a great motivator,
it got me
right?
fired up.
Our childhood wounding.
And it's
like,
and it's true, but it wasn't fulfilling, right?
Right.
Tony Robbins talks about,
course.
of course, right? Tony Robbins says success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure.
Right.
And I was succeeding, but was the void, and so that was a massive shift. And I can't imagine what your Hoffman experience was like, because so much of the process is in direct correlation to our upbringing with mom and dad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was tricky. My Hoffman experience was a little bit different at the time. My partner was a sex addict, heavily steeped in prostitutes and things like that. And so when I went in, I wish I would have gone in when I was single, because the focus would have been different. But I was in so much pain in my relationship. I was trying to find my way out of that. And undoubtedly I found the pattern of, I modeled my parents' relationship and choosing partners like that. And so that was really healing and eye-opening. And it's also painful to look at these aspects of ourselves and the years that we've lost to these relationship patterns modeled by our parents, right?
Yeah, and I feel that too, because modeling my parents' relationship, I've been really, really lucky. My parents had a very beautiful marriage, and I don't have a memory of them even arguing.
Really?
Not once.
Oh.
I'm really lucky. My house was full of love. It was totally safe, fully supportive. Our parents made it. All of my siblings have been really successful in whatever they're working on. It's crazy how successful all of our siblings are, and it's because we were raised in a home where our parents fully believed in us and told us, like, you're worthy, you can do whatever you want.
Wow.
And so, as great as that sounds, right, it's also in my head, it's like I have this perfect expectation of my partner has to be absolutely perfect, and if there's disagreement, then it's not the one.
Oh.
Right. So there's also, it's a double-edged sword on that. Yeah. And doing a lot of that work and that healing work as well in the psychedelic space too. I'm curious your thoughts, going back, you mentioned that psychedelics aren't for anyone, aren't for everyone.
Yeah.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your reasoning is behind that.
Well, I think that I love the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? And I think that our teacher in life can come in so many different ways. And I think that we have to have a foundation in order to navigate psychedelics appropriately. And I've watched, I dated someone that ended up taking his own life. And I think when he cracked open the truth of who he was, he didn't know how to put that back together. And I'm
curious, was he raised LDS?
Yes.
So, and this is this is just information I'm trying to put together. I haven't seen any research on this. I have 3 friends who grew up Mormon, got into the psychedelic space, and committed suicide. 3. And here in LA, I tell people that, and I haven't heard of anyone else dealing with that. But all the people I know who got into the psychedelic space, who grew up Mormon, committed suicide. I haven't heard of anyone.
And what's your interpretation of that?
I don't know. It's, I try and piece it together. Like, I think about one of my close friends, Johnny Robb, one of my best friends, and was a fun, loving kid, high energy, had lots of friends, he's a really handsome, good looking guy, super buff. And, he had his trials, of course, and got into the psychedelic space, and then, lost his mind. Yeah. Like, had a schizophrenic break. Yeah. And eventually took his own life. And I've got, other friends along the way too, and acquaintances. And I wonder if it has something to do with, like, as kids, Mormonism really is at its core. It really is a spiritual religion. Like, the whole religion is based upon a mystical experience. Yeah. 14-year-old kid out in the woods, sees God in the woods, creates a new religion. Like, that's a very mystical belief.
That's only because Joseph Smith was on psilocybin.
He probably was, right? I'm totally behind the mushroom, that makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm curious if it's like, because, we're raised in such a mystical religion, and, you hear the stories of the Urim and Thummim, and, and it's like, it's magical, right? There's a lot of magic in there. And I'm curious if that has something to do with it. Because I don't know if with your partner at the time, but the three things in common with my three friends who committed suicide is at one moment they had Christ complex, where like they thought, they're like, oh, I'm the chosen one. I'm special. I have the secret information.
Yeah.
Almost like this Joseph Smith-esque calling. And, it could be, and it gets really messy.
I mean, that's a whole nother podcast of let's talk about narcissism in the psychedelic space and the God complex. And I don't know that we need to dive into that one, but it definitely is a thing, and it's something that needs to be addressed. It's interesting. My sister, who recently just passed away, I had introduced her into psychedelics, and I think for her, I remember a journey that she had done where she saw in that experience that she was responsible for the reality of her life. And the pain she endured, that she could no longer blame anyone else for the reality she had created. I don't think she could reconcile that within herself,
Wow.
When we have no one else to blame. And I'm not saying that was the cause of her taking her life. I just think that if you don't have a core foundation, even with the God complex, right? If you don't have a sense of solid reality, coming back from some of these experiences is incredibly challenging.
That was my hardest part, right? I fell victim to that for sure. There were moments, when I first got in the psychedelic space where I felt superior because I had gained specific knowledge and insight that I thought no one else had.
Yeah.
And so I remember flirting with that, and it was incredibly disorienting, and it's scary, right? Because your whole viewpoint on reality gets shattered. And if you don't, to your point, if you don't have a foundation, a sturdy foundation and the tools, you can get lost.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly scary.
Yeah.
Right. And it's disorienting and confusing. And I'm really, really grateful that I was working with multiple therapists, and I had a psychedelic coach, someone who really grounded me and brought me back to earth. And, my close friends and family will know that there was a time where people were worried about me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, Doug's kind of lost a little bit. He's kind of in the clouds.
Yeah.
And because I had the right resources and tools and connections to people to really root me back in, I don't want to know where I could have gone, because I could have been, on that line. And so I agree with you that psychedelics definitely are not for everyone.
Yeah.
But they're for a lot of people.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I had kind of like the adverse effect when I first started doing psychedelics, where, the medicine was like, you are meant for greatness. You're going to do all these things. And I was kind of like, who, me? Like, I don't know. And I really sat on some of the clear directives that the medicine had for so many years, questioning its validity, right? Because, and it's like now in retrospect, it's, probably a little bit of that part of me that doesn't believe I'm enough, or that I'm not worthy of that, and the hold that had. But I've watched in the psychedelic space how, one, I think a lot of people are taking way too much medicine, way too often, and it's losing its, impact of, can we use this medicinally? And it's not to say that you can't have your fun with psychedelics. That's not, but I think there's, setting and the therapeutic benefits, and to be very conscious about how you're using these, sacred medicines.
Yeah. What's your relationship with psychedelics today?
It's a good question. So I've been working in the psychedelic space. I was building ketamine centers in Salt Lake, and then running retreats in Costa Rica with ayahuasca. And so right now I've kind of taken a time out to complete my memoir. And I also just, if I never did psychedelics again, I have gotten all I need from them. I have more insights and wisdom that could last me a lifetime of continuing to unpack and integrate. So right now I've kind of taken a break from it because I feel like, we can keep going back to the medicine for answers, but it's really about us doing the work in the here and now to put what we've seen into motion. And I definitely, it's like until I do some of the clear directives that I've seen, it's not time to go back and do more. And so I'm kind of working with some of those things right now personally.
I love that you said that. I did an ayahuasca ceremony in November, and it was my first one in 2.5 years. And I was dealing with, pretty similar stuff, relationships, health, finances, friendships, right? Dealing with some problems I hadn't solved yet and trying to figure it out and looking for direction. And I sit in this ceremony and I get into the space, right? I mean, for me, ayahuasca is really intense, and I'll share. So for me, what happens, you drink like this small tea, and for whatever reason, I'm always communicating with interdimensional beings. Like, I know it sounds crazy. Like,
you're an alien.
I'm an alien. But I go through like what I call the fractal forest. I start and it gets really weird fractals, and there's like puzzles. Yeah. And I have to like complete these weird puzzles that are like geometry based and whatnot. And if I get them right, I get rewarded. And then eventually I get through like this fractal place, and I'm in more of like a meeting setting, and I get to communicate with the medicine. And I finally like work through, and by the way, like this fractal force is like, it's hard. Like it's hard work of like, what's going on? I'm trying to make sense of all these weird, it's just really weird. And then I get through, and I'm almost like at this meeting center, this learning center. And I finally get there to like talk to the medicine. And I'm like, relationships, finances, career, like what am I supposed to do? And it just laughed at me. And it's like, you think you can just come here and get all your answers? No, like you're not getting anything tonight. You learn by doing. You learn by doing. You have to have the human experience. You have to play it out. That's how you're going to learn.
Yeah.
So don't just come here and think you're going to get answers. And I was like, really? And they're like, no. And that was it. Like,
perfect. I love that.
But it was so empowering.
Right.
It's like, oh, yeah, duh. I actually... And,
you have everything you need within you.
And what was really cool, it was the insight of like the truest part of my being, my soul, actually desires the obstacle. It desires the opportunity to figure it out in real time. I actually don't want the answer.
Yeah.
Because if I have the answer, it takes away the lesson.
Right.
It takes away the growth. It takes away the learning opportunity.
And the journey.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the most fun part.
Yeah.
And so it was like this really empowering, silly night of like, I can't just hack your way to the end. You actually, and the reality is that you actually don't want the answer. That the need for the mystery, the need for the unknown, the need for the obstacle, the need for the trial is just, if not more important than the actual end result.
It's like spoiling the surprise.
Yeah. It's like, if you sit down to watch a movie, you're not going to just fast forward to the very end. You got to go through the trial and the obstacles and the journey, right? And it was really beautiful insight. And, since then I haven't been called to the medicine work. It's like...
So I'm curious, do you see these beings outside of medicine?
No. Are they in the room with us right now?
I know. I don't know. Where are they?
It's really weird. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but like people talk about doing ayahuasca and they're like, oh, there's like in the jungle and there's panthers and there's animals. And I'm like, no, I'm in like hyperspace communicating with aliens from other dimensions. And it's just really confusing. And I hate, like you said, you like doing psychedelics.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Oh, really?
I hate it because it's so intense and so overwhelming and so confusing. And every time I'm doing ayahuasca, I'm like, okay, I'm here. Give me the information, and I cannot wait till this is over.
Yeah.
Like, get me out of here. But no, I mean, my psychedelic experiences have been really, really beautiful. Switching gears here, you're recently engaged.
I am.
This is so exciting. And a lot of our friendship over the years has been talking about dating and whatnot. And now you've got a lovely fiance.
I do have a lovely fiance. Yes, he's a sports agent. And it was kind of nuts. I had a girlfriend call me and she said, I had a dream you met your one. I'm like, yeah, no, I got nothing. I actually took a year off of, and decided to be celibate. and really work on my core wounds around relationships, because similar to you, I was like, why can't I get this right? I've done medicine, I've done therapy. Why do I keep ending?
You're a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
all the things.
yeah.
You're like, clearly I should be able to figure this out. And so she said, I had a dream you met your person. I'm like, not me, but what's going on in your life? And she's like, well, I'm doing a book club. And we're doing the book Calling in the One. I'm like, well, it sounds like I should be in your book club for sure, which I ended up joining. Have you read that book?
I have it. Yeah, I've gone through probably the first third of it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that it taught me in going through that is how I was playing out relationship patterns because of my childhood modeling, and also the ways that I was out of integrity in what I was looking for in a partner.
Yeah.
And, it was through complete fate. I had gone on retreat. I just figured this out recently. I had gone on retreat with this spiritual teacher who channels those from the other side. And my sister Jennifer had just died. And she said, oh, your sister's here. She is playing matchmaker in heaven. And she says she thinks you may know him. He lives in the snow, which I live in Park City. But this was before I actually met him. And she said, trust the river. That's love. And I was in a film on Netflix, The River Runner. And my fiance had watched it on Netflix and reached out to me on Facebook. And he said, hey, I think we both live in Park City. Do you want to meet? And that is how I met him. And I had told...
It goes down in the DMs.
I mean, I told the universe, I was like, look, you're going to have to drop him from the heavens because I'm not doing dating apps. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do it. It's not my jam. I can't, it's just not me. And literally, that's what happened. They dropped him from the universe into my lap on Facebook.
Because we both have dated a lot and we've had similar struggles.
Yep.
How did you know this one was different?
I think I've dated a lot of beautiful, successful humans, but I was struggling to find someone who could speak a spiritual language with me. And I needed someone that not only was successful, but also had emotional intelligence. And, I say that very reverently because there's so many people on their paths in different ways. And with Michael, he was able to meet me there. And when we first got together, one of the things that I love the most about him is he would wake me up at 3:00 in the morning, which some people are like, don't ever wake me up.
Yeah.
But we would have the juiciest conversations in the middle of the night, talking about things that I had never had anyone be able to meet me in those conversations. And, that it was like, you had me at hello.
Yeah. Did your celibacy play a role, do you think, in this?
1,000%. I think that it was interesting when I was doing the book club, one of my gorgeous girlfriends, Tadia, there was a time when I was talking about my dating life, and she said, hey, I don't feel like you're really being respectful of what you're calling in right now to the universe and what you want in a partner. And I had to, it was in that moment, I had to check myself of, hey, look, anything that we put out there energetically is coming back at us.
Wow.
So I've got to be so in integrity with myself and how I'm showing up so that someone can mirror that energy, right? And so I think too, I had, due to my sexual abuse, I became very hypersexual when I was younger. Yeah. And really misused sex and power. And I had tremendous healing that I had to go through around that to really become in alignment with my feminine energy and also command respect in a different way.
Yeah, for the females listening, what are some tools to navigate some of that?
Well, I think, and are you speaking specifically around sexual abuse?
Yeah, the sexual abuse and then using, being hyperactive sexually.
I think it's so important that, to disentangle all of that and to see, when a child is sexually abused at a young age, it actually distorts their eroticism. And so I worked with a lot of incredible, and one in particular, trauma therapists to really understand what part of it was being turned on in an inappropriate way, and to really heal those aspects. And it's individual for everyone because everyone's sexual abuse
Sure.
history is different. And but for me, it was coming into alignment with really owning my femininity. And also, I love that, I'm sure you've heard the saying, don't ever have sex with someone that you don't want to take on all their trauma. You know, and there's this energy exchange that we have sexually with people, and to really be intentional of who do I want to exchange my energy with in this intimate way, because be sure you don't do it if you don't want to take on all of their stuff, and be willing to go on that healing journey with them. And I think it really shifted me in, hey, I need someone who's aligned here and who wants to go on this journey with me.
You know, you mentioned earlier about what does it look like to do the work,
Oh,
and it sounds like you did the work there.
it's a lot of work.
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 Oh.
Yeah, I'm inspired by you, Trish. And I also want to talk about your foundation.
Oh.
Yeah, because you do. Not only, you do it all, right? You got the book coming out, and you're sharing your story, and you're a successful entrepreneur, and you give back.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what role does like actually giving back play in our lives, and the foundation, and what inspired you to start your foundation?
Oh, I love you for asking this question, because above all else, this is my heart and soul. After I lost my sister in 2017, I reached out to some girlfriends and just said, tell me what to go do to be of service. I knew it wasn't going to be therapy. I knew it wasn't going to be, any traditional way. And she said, pack your bags and go to Africa. And so I went to Uganda, Tororo, Uganda, to this tiny little village. And when I arrived there, this army of angels, of orphan children came out singing, welcoming me. And in an instant, I knew I was home. Like, if you believe in past lives, in a past life, I had to have lived in Africa, and oftentimes people say, do you feel comfortable going to Africa alone, and you're blonde and blue eyed? And it's like, I feel so at home. Words cannot express. And I ended up falling in love with this family. There was a woman there who was a school teacher, and she saw all of these children coming to school that, clearly were homeless, living on the streets, famished, and she started taking them in. And so after meeting them, I came home, I filed a 501c3, and have created the Orphans Club. Orphansclub.org is my organization. We now have over 150 orphans. You've helped us grow and rebuild our school just recently. And, we believe in educating every child for a brighter future. And that's what we're working on right now.
It's so incredible. And, in my experience, I'm a big believer, the true secret to life is giving. The secret to living is giving.
Yeah.
And anytime I catch myself, it reminds me of a silly story, but I remember I had a date lined up. This was over like a year ago. This girl is this bombshell. I'm way into her, and like right before she cancels. And I'm so pissed, and I'm so upset, and I'm so disappointed. And I'm like, I'm just going to go home and sulk and be on Instagram. Like, no, I need to do active service. Like, I need to figure out secret to living is giving. What can I do? And coincidentally, a friend, really an acquaintance, posted on Instagram, like, hey, anyone in LA, I need help moving. And this is someone I haven't talked to in years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yep, I can help you. What's the address? And I went over immediately and helped her move in and whatnot. And I remember leaving that feeling just so fulfilled and so energetic. And so your scale, you're talking about a whole nother scale of like really, helping these orphans and giving back and supporting them, right? What role does that fill in your life? And talk about like why truly secret to living is giving, and what to expect like when you do. Like, how does it help you get out of your own way?
1,000,000%. When I arrived in Africa, I thought I was going to help them. And really, they saved me. In 2017, not only did I lose my sister, I lost my best friend, another friend, an employee, and my sister-in-law, all to sudden and tragic deaths. And, you know, I tried to get pregnant again after my son and had a few miscarriages. And here, all of a sudden, when I didn't think I would have a child of my own, to be and have influence around, here, the universe gave me 150 children. Like, it is the greatest gift to be of service. And I think that, you know, really at a time, my father was given up for adoption when he was 4 years old. His parents could no longer afford he and his brother. And so it's, you know, to watch the cycle of being able to be of influence in different ways in our life. And, you know, I also, I don't think I've even told you this, have filed another nonprofit where we're now doing scholarships for people who can't afford either mental health or even doing psychedelic journeys. You know, everyone, as I said, everyone's path is different and we don't know what that looks like. And so now I believe that if my sisters had more resources, they would probably be here today. And so really creating a nonprofit that can help with a myriad of different things, whether it be housing or food or healing or therapy or even psychedelic journeys. So I'm really excited to get that launched.
Yeah, it's incredible work. It's so beautiful. And it's also evident that you are no stranger to death.
No,
right?
I know.
Talk to me about your relationship with your own mortality. Like, what is your relationship with death today? When there's been so much around you.
Yeah, there's been too much around me. It's such a good question. I guess, you know, I read an article, I think it was in the New York Times just a couple days ago, where this woman, I think it was Switzerland, where she could go and pay to actually take her own life. And she was struggling with cancer and riled and all this pain and just felt like she couldn't live life anymore. And a lot of people were ridiculing her for that decision. And yet she just said, my quality of life is so poor. I'm in so much pain. And I look at that of, you know, one of the teachings that I learned when I went to the University of Santa Monica was we all are here to live out our own spiritual curriculums. And when that time is up, regardless of what age you are, etc., that's the extent of your lifetime here. And having that as a principle and belief system for me, that my sisters lived to their extent of their spiritual curriculum. They came to learn what they were meant to learn. And I think for me, I hold on to a similar set of beliefs of when it's my time, it's my time. I just pray it's not a painful death, you know?
And what do you hope happens when you die?
Oh, I want to go see everyone in the spirit world that I haven't been able to see for a while. And the first thing, I'm going to go hug my sisters. And then, of course, I have to reincarnate and come back. But I'm going to be completely enlightened on the next round.
Of course. Yeah. Man, well, Trish, I'm really inspired by you.
Oh, same. You've been a mentor and friend and guide for me along the way as well. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Yeah, it's been fun as our journeys have kind of zigzagged and we've kind of been learning off each other, and really excited for your memoir.
Thank you.
Really excited for all the insights you're bringing and really giving a voice to people who currently don't have a voice.
Yeah.
It's really powerful stuff. And so we'll definitely keep everyone in the loop when the book comes out and any other media that comes out.
Yeah.
And one more time, for those, you know, first off, if anyone who wants to go deeper, where can they find you, and tell us more about what your organization is again? The website.
So my website's patricianoelle.com, Noelle. And my orphanage is orphansclub.org. And work with a lot of beautiful humans out there.
Well, I really love you.
I love you more.
Thanks for coming on.
Okay. Mwah.